Welcome. My name is Rebecca Goldberg. I'm the co-facilitator of the Afterschool Time Impact Group for Grantmakers for Education. Thrilled to have you here today. As you likely know, we're here to talk about federal opportunities and some challenges ahead in year 2023 for the Afterschool Time field. And we've got a number of experts with us to share their perspectives from the federal, state, and municipal level. So there's lots of information that we'll share today, and we'll also have a good amount of time to have questions from the audience. So I'm suggesting, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourselves in the chat. You can share your name and your organization and pronouns. And then what is one policy related question that you're thinking about, wondering about, maybe you're inspired by or could be worried about. So it's good just to hear what's on your mind, and it could be a question that you hope folks address today, or just something that you've been noodling on yourself. So I'd love for you to do that in the chat. I am happy that I'm thrilled that we have great speakers here today, and we have a wonderful moderator. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Ron Ottinger, who's the Executive Director of the STEM Next Opportunity Fund. Ron is a seasoned grant maker, having worked in both the after school, out of school time space, and specifically in STEM, as well as STEM and out of school time. So likely many of you know him and his work. He's also been a prolific funder in policy work and in being creative in ways that you can have some influence, including helping place now 10 fellows in federal departments. So, I think he serves as a great role model for how private funders can actually get in this game of policy and help build field capacity to address policy opportunities. So I'm going to hand it over to Ron, and then he's going to introduce our speakers. But thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Rebecca, and I'm honored to be with this great group of folks who have joined us. Many of you, when you talk about seasoned and expert, you are the ones who make the work we do possible and have really helped advance the field of after school, out of school, summer, STEM, the arts, many of the important areas that we all care about. And as Rebecca said, just really pleased with Melissa Moritz's leadership on our team. We now have four fellows at the Department of Education. We have one at the Department of Labor. We have two about to start at HHS. We have one and about to add a second at AmeriCorps, and more in the works. Department of Defense is about to be posted. So we are thrilled on that front, and also to be part of a funder of the STEM hub that the After School Alliance leads. And Erik may say a word about that. I'm just thrilled to have our speakers who are with us today and to have a robust conversation after they give us some of their wisdom. Just from my left, I think you all know all these folks, so they don't need introductions, but Belah Shah is the Program Director for Education and Expanded Learning at the National League of Cities. Rivera is the Policy Specialist for Education at the National Council of State Legislatures, and Erik Peterson is the Senior Vice President of Policy for the Afterschool Alliance. And I think on our agenda, Erik, we have you up first to kind of give an overview of what's happening on the policy front from the Alliance's point of view. And each of them will have about up to 10 minutes. Rebecca will keep us on track. As you have questions, please throw them in the chat so that we can see what's on your mind, and also the ability later on to come off mute and to chat as well. So Erik.
Thanks so much, Ron, and thanks for the opportunity. Good afternoon, everybody / morning. I'm starting my timer. I probably will go over, so Rebecca just cut me off, and then we'll talk later in questions. I'm going to try to share slides really quick. I hope everyone is doing well. Okay, we did this right before and it was fine, and now it's not letting me. Ah,
I know they just worked a minute ago.
no. I know, it's funny how that is. Yeah, I'm not getting the option. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry. And we'll do this. Okay, let me know if that's working for folks.
Yep.
Yep, we got it.
Okay. Oops. All right. Hi, everybody. So Erik Peterson with the Afterschool Alliance. Hopefully folks are aware of us. If not, we're at afterschoolalliance.org. You can check out our site. We've been doing this work for about 23 years. I'm going to talk about a little bit today, the Congress picture, the 118th Congress and the federal level, some insights on the tracking we're doing on American Rescue Plan money, some state outlook, and bright spots, and yeah. So federal funding, first of all, why federal funding and after school? Hopefully most of you all are aware of the connection and the importance of the federal government. Obviously education in this country is a local and state issue, but the vast majority of after school programs, while they're funded by parent fees, the second most important funding source for after school and summer programs is federal and state investments. 21st Century Community Learning Centers has long historically been the only exclusive source of after school and summer funding from the federal government, but recently American Rescue Plan and some of the set-asides have certainly helped, and we'll talk about that as well. Now more than ever, we see a possible funding cliff with American Rescue Plan funding deadlines for the education funds, at least, happening in 2024, and for the city and county funds, state funds through Treasury in 2026, but also growing demand and student need. So the cost, or rather the funding, has leveled off. We've been getting increases pretty consistently, but they just haven't been keeping up with inflation, with increased cost of salaries and supplies and the other costs that it takes to run a quality program as well. So that said, 21st Century continues to be a vital funding stream and part of the solution, we feel, in sustaining the investments that were made in the American Rescue Plan moving forward. The other, big driver here about the need continues to be unmet demand. We are at the highest level we've been since we started back in 2004 at the Afterschool Alliance, looking at what students are doing in the hours after school as well. And so we're around 25 million students now that would be in a program if one were available. Cost continues to be, and availability continues to be the big factors that is exacerbating even higher demand and need when we look at families of color, low-income families, and those with children in elementary school as increased demand as well. And then, of course, the other piece here, which I don't have a slide for, but we're all well aware of the academic needs, the social and emotional needs coming out of the pandemic, the mental health needs. We saw CDC, data on that this week. And we know that school time programs can really help address, are not the silver bullet, but can certainly help address and be part of the solution to some of those issues. So the challenges in Congress, most folks are probably familiar. We're in divided government now with slim margins of control on both sides of the Congress and the House and Senate. It took 15 votes to select a House Speaker. Toxic partisanship has been a theme over the last several sessions of Congress, but it continues. There are divides sort of that we've seen at the local and state level around some of the cultural issues. Those are present in the House, particularly this year. We saw that already in a hearing already this session in the House Education and Workforce Committee. And then the big issue, obviously, is the spending issue. So Congressional Budget Office reports coming out earlier this week on Wednesday. We're at, fourth highest figure in terms of annual deficits. We are on track, again, to really need to address the spending in the country. And so that, makes it increasingly important to talk about priorities, talk about the impact of investment, return on investment of programs, and the need really for education dollars in funding, both in school, but really out of school as well, to help ensure that young people now who are the adults of the future are able to succeed. And that is a big part of, and often left out of the conversation, the part of the fiscal health of the country is making sure that folks are in the workforce, and tax revenue drives the revenue side of the equation. That it's not all just about cutting spending. There are proposals around cutting discretionary spending back to 2022 levels. There's a lot of proposals floating out there that for 21st century would mean a 40 million cut alone. It would have a huge impact on the local level, where we know, again, the need and demand continues to grow. Again, split Congress and makes it really difficult to get things done. Both disagreements within parties, slim majorities. It's hard to advance legislation, but it's also an opportunity to advance issues with bipartisan support. And we'll talk about that in a second. So the road ahead in terms of Congress for the funding question, respecting the president's budget proposal on March 9th or around then. Appropriation subcommittee is already announcing their hearings. They'll do markup this spring, early summer. There's a move, as there is often in new session of Congress, to try to follow regular order and actually get all 12 spending bills done by September 30th. But this whole issue of the debt ceiling and debt limit needs to be resolved by June-ish. And it could just certainly impact the spending process this year more than it would in a normal year. September 30th, obviously, is the deadline for a current fiscal year and the start of the October 1st start of the new fiscal year. And so something is going to happen by then. Either we'll have those individual spending bills passed, which I think will be a heavy lift, but certainly would be the goal if you would ask members of Congress. Could have an omnibus bill, though lots of talk about how we don't want to do that again. The omnibus bill that passed in December obviously came up a lot on the House floor during the 15 speaker votes as a sort of talking point and a path people don't want to go down. We could have a short term or a full year continuing resolution, which would end up being at FY23 levels and not help programs address the increase in costs. Or we could end up with a shutdown or a series of shutdowns or a partial shutdown if some funding bills get through or not. So it certainly won't be for the faint of heart. It'll be an interesting year ahead. But again, while there's challenges, the flip side of that is there's always opportunities. In terms of what Congress might work on in the education out of school time space, maybe Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. There was some progress in the House in that last year, might be some more, maybe higher education. Federal work studies is a key component to help support, bring college students working in after school and summer programs. Maybe the Farm Bill, there's some opportunities there. Childcare, there's some folks talking about a summer learning bill as well. But regardless, building awareness about the importance of after school and summer on all levels will be critical. The good news is after school is bipartisan. It always has been, and it continues to grow in terms of being a bipartisan issue. We have bipartisan House and Senate after school caucuses. And we had polling data come out both this week and then a second report and then a first report 2 weeks ago. We're at record highs in terms of voters. This is from a voter poll done right after the election in November last year. 8 in 10 voters want more funding for after school. Even questions around would they like to see their taxes increased in order to support after school and summer opportunities, they say yes. 90% for Democrats, 66% for independents. And then also from other research, 78% of parents agree that local government should invest some of the money they receive from COVID relief funding. 76% of parents said school districts should invest COVID relief funds in after school and summer programs. So again, wide support, and ARP is making a difference. So we're at 122 billion that went to schools, 90% to districts. As of now, approximately 60% of those funds have been spent, which means there's opportunities to continue to tap in and talk to school districts and form those partnerships and access those funds. Of the 8.4 billion in after school, summer, and state and learning recovery state set-asides, about 3 billion we estimate has been spent on after school and summer. That's compared to 1.3 billion annually for 21st century. Another, depending on who you talk to, so 6.5 billion if you use a sort of broad approach of what after school is. If you look at just comprehensive quality evidence-based after school and summer, we think the estimate is, we're still working on that. We have fellows looking through those plans. But we estimate at least $1 billion, but probably more of local funds being spent on the comprehensive quality after school and summer. And then, as Belah might mention, National League of Cities estimates at least $1 billion in local recovery funds. So we're looking at about a $5 billion right now funding cliff. That number might go up, but that's what we have to cover. We have the stories and the examples and success thanks to our partnership with National League of Cities and others, populating this map. If you have stories of success of how ARP funds have been used, let us know. We'd love to add to it. And then finally, closing that gap is going to take not just one source. It'll be local, state, and federal. It'll be all of you on the line too that are with private philanthropy. It's going to be a combination. And how we do that is we collect those success stories, get them in the map, make the case, use the data and evaluations. So far, 4 states have done evaluations of the ARP spending, showing great success, particularly on the summer side, but after school as well. 18 states have funding streams for after school, about $4.3 billion. 19 more this year so far have introduced legislation around adding funding support for after school and summer that they previously didn't have. And I've listed some of the funding sources that we're seeing traction at the state and local level on there. Federal funding will be key, about 100 federal funding sources for after school and summer. Some will be familiar to folks, 21st century, Title I, childcare, but also in the workforce space, in the juvenile justice space, and other education funding streams. Lots of great resources from Wallace Foundation and others around tapping into some of these federal sources, and we're always happy to help folks connect to those funding streams. And that was a lot, and I'm over time, and I'll throw it back to Ron. Thank
Very
you all.
impressive, Erik. You ran through everything so well, and so much for us to think about. We'll come back to questions, right, Rebecca?
Yeah, we'll come back.
And please keep putting your questions in the chat. Some really helpful ones so far. Belah, you're up next.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, I will share my screen as well. Okay, I'll scroll back over here. Oops. Okay, is this good? Are we seeing it? Yes. Fantastic. Well, hello, everyone. I am Belah Shah from the National League of Cities, and it's such a pleasure to be with you all. So excited that this topic is of interest to all of our funders across the country. We really need you, as Erik said, to help advance this work for our kids. So I'm going to just start off. I've spoken to this group before, but maybe there's new people. So National League of Cities, we are the voice of America's cities. We represent over 200 million people across the country. We have about 2,600 individual member cities who are a part of NLC. So I sit within our education team, and I've been working at NLC for this is my 19th year, really supporting city leaders understand their role in advancing opportunities for young people across the education spectrum. So the big topic, right, is the American Rescue Plan Act, and I will focus particularly on the local and fiscal state and local fiscal recovery funds portion of ARP, which is much smaller than the amount of dollars that are in ESSER, but still a sizable number. And we've been really excited to see the kind of investments that cities have been making. So a couple of points really quickly is that I call it SLIFR, the local funds have a different timeline than the school district funds. So that's just really important to note as we think about opportunities for cities to play a role in this, that there's a little bit of a longer runway, though, the pressures are still coming down on them as well. So they have until the end of 2024 to allocate, and I was about to start my timer and I didn't. They have until the end of 2024 to allocate their dollars and to the end of 2026 to spend. So we have seen that, not all cities have fully allocated, and we're tracking that as well. But the main point here is that within these dollars, they're very flexible dollars. They can be used from anything from water and sewer and, infrastructure, as well as supporting young people. The allowable use is right there in terms of being able to respond to the negative impacts of the pandemic, and certainly the impacts on young people were negative. And just to kind of prelude some of the research that we've done, as ARP was coming out and all the CARES dollars were going out, we did a survey at the end of 2021 and released this report in early 2022 that was really tracking sort of the evolution of investments and partnerships that we were seeing cities make in after school and summer programs, kind of looking across those timeframes of pre, during, and post-pandemic. So we were really pleased with what we saw. We had over 100 cities participate in the survey, and we saw that the number of cities that were funding after school and summer learning programs grew during the pandemic recovery period and continued to grow afterwards. And cities said that they also anticipated funding after school and summer learning programs, in increased ways post-pandemic. We also saw that the number of cities that were actually increasing the number, their actual dollar investment amount was also growing. We saw that it continued to grow. This is the dark blue to look at it quickly, was growing in terms of how much they were investing compared to the before the pandemic to the peak of the pandemic, and then looking at post-pandemic as well. Just quickly, you'll see here that we also saw that there was an increase in partnerships with school districts and other community-based organizations throughout the pandemic. Certainly cities needed to rely on their community and school partners to really help ensure that young people were okay. And then just this point to also enforce Erik's point that we saw that there was a growing sentiment across city leaders. They really felt that after school and summer programs were extremely or very important, quite a high majority at 87%. So this continues to, reinforce this opportunity. What we did also ask them is, where they needed additional resources and tools. And here you see that the top three were that they do need stronger partnerships with schools. And I know this has been a theme, throughout the year for all of us tracking this work, that we're looking for more partnerships between schools and CBOs and schools and cities and kind of across these sectors, especially as we're looking at the potential to use ARPA funds, ESSER funds for that. Also additional outreach and tools to ensure that the participants in programs are more diverse and more funding. So the big news here is what Erik foreshadowed, is that we saw this and was like, okay, there's a moment here. We need to really understand what's going on. And so we were able to track 80 cities that were making investments using specifically ARPA dollars, the SLIFR dollars. This data comes as of March 2022. New data has come in from Treasury, and NLC has gotten the direct reports from cities to really look at where they're investing. So we put out this report in the fall that shows kind of our research on these 80 cities, how cities were using their ARPA funds to help young people recover. What we saw is that cities cumulatively invested over $2 billion across a number of different areas that support young people's growth and recovery. When you look at it in a little bit more of a broken down way, of course, the range of dollars going to each city differs upon city size. So we saw that most cities were spending between $1 and $12 million on young people, and the larger cities, were spending between 60 and over $500 million, depending upon city size. What we did was take all of the investments that we saw. We were looking at, the city ARPA reports themselves, as well as, city council hearings, press reports, and kind of grouped the investments into these 8 categories. So there's a mix of infrastructure and programs, as well as employment and other youth engagement programs for opportunity youth. And what we found was that over $1 billion was spent specifically on after school and summer learning programs. You can see that this is over 2 times the amount of any other investment the cities were making in young people in these categories. So collectively, for the whole pool, over 60% of what cities were investing in the young people category, was going towards after school and summer learning. So we were really delighted to see that and know that there's a lot more data to uncover. So this is the same map that Erik, we tag team all the time, so in these presentations. But we were really able to populate this map and did it in great partnership with the After School Alliance to show the examples of cities that were investing those dollars. So you click on the different colors or the different shapes, and you can actually just sort and see only the city investment ones. The amount of programs that we tracked are larger. The number is larger than what's on this map because NLC and the Alliance have used a little bit of a different definition. We wanted to make sure we were capturing all the types of investment cities were making in young people, and in anything in the after school and summer space. Not only the comprehensive programs, which is what the After School Alliance was tracking. And so we wanted to give kudos to cities for doing something for young people. And it was a good place to start. And we hope that, that they are understanding the value and the importance of a comprehensive after school and summer program. So our numbers are a little bit greater. I have a couple examples to kind of show you, what we found. So for example, in DC, we saw that there was a $2 million expansion of their city-run program, which was providing a lot of academic and recreational activities to young people in DC. Sacramento's program is a little bit, it's not a comprehensive program, but there was over $1 million to expand what they called the Youth Pop-Ups program that was providing different weekend events for young people in under-resourced areas for other academic and recreational and other services. And I should say we categorized it in 3 ways, right? We saw a lot of cities certainly investing their dollars in their own programs, a lot of park and rec, a lot of library programs. We also saw them investing in community-based organizations. So you have a couple examples here where you see cities, partnering with their United Way or other nonprofits to ensure that those funds are getting to young people and getting to programs. So, Boys and Girls Club and a smaller town in Idaho, still significant number of dollars in a number of communities and social services. We're looking hard for more examples of cities that are partnering with school districts. Bridgeport has been a long-standing example with a great partnership between the city and the Bridgeport Public Schools, and they were able to enhance that with ARPA dollars. Here you can see that they really were able to leverage and blend their dollars to support a number of community-based organizations. And then you also saw infrastructure, like hard infrastructure. In Richmond, Virginia, a high majority went into enhancing their recreation centers. And then you see in South Salt Lake Tahoe, California, a smaller community, they took some dollars to revitalize a local skate park and really heard from the community about what the young people wanted. So that was exciting to see as well. So here's the current news. We have a lot more data that's come in recently, like I said. We show you here that over 67% of the funding has been allocated. So there's about 30% left, has been budgeted, allocated, right, not spent. And so we're looking to see how that number is going to change. We anticipate with the end of the fiscal year for cities, which is at the end of summer, that more cities are going to be allocating their budgets as they see this timeline and this clock ticking down. But you can see that there's been a high number of dollars that have been tracked, and this is across all of the different areas that cities can invest in. The kind of areas where we would see some more education things would probably fall in the community aid portion here, this 11%. We see some things in economic and workforce development, summer youth employment would potentially fit under there. Even in public safety, we've seen things are categorized that way by Treasury, but when you really dig into the city plan, we have found that these violence prevention or public safety programs can be after school programs, right? We all know that after school programs play that role. So we've had to do a lot more digging, we need a little bit more capacity within NLC to help us kind of get this analysis. So anyone who wants to partner with NLC, please reach out to me. But we are excited to really dig into these plans to increase our numbers. As I said, all of the data that I presented to you before was on the 80 cities that we had been able to track as of March 2022. Ton more data has come in for what they're calling tier 2 cities, which is cities that are under 250,000 in population, as well as tier 5 cities that are those smaller communities under 50,000. So just a couple more, that was my 10-minute mark. Just want to mention that NLC has a new president. We elect a president every year, and Victoria Woodards from Tacoma, Washington is our new president, and we're really excited about her leadership. She has a priority around workforce and housing, but has also a strong commitment to young people and has done a lot of excellent work in her community supporting young people. So we're really excited to have her on our side and to leverage her leadership and her visibility. And then I know Erik and I are in this together. We are part of the Engage Every Student initiative with the U.S. Department of Education, which is really a bold call to action from Secretary Cardona that is looking to ensure that every young person who wants to participate in a high quality after school program has the opportunity. So these 5 organizations have been working together to really get the word out about this call to action, provide resources and tools and technical assistance to communities to really understand the money that's in communities already. How do you leverage ARP to advance out of school time? And just some numbers that Sharonda, our fellow at the U.S. Department of Education, funded by STEMnext, shared the other day is that we have grown the number of people that are participating in this initiative with us. And there's over 10,000 people who have already subscribed to a newsletter that we're putting out to get resources out into the field. So we are looking at an initiative to really ramp up our capacity to provide more technical assistance to communities as well, and are looking for funder support to join us in that endeavor. So again, if this is a space that you would like to participate in, we welcome you to reach out to us as well. And I hate to end on this bad note, but it may lend itself to good conversation later. This is actually survey findings from the American Association of Superintendents. What they presented to our group recently. And what they were talking about was what they were worried about they would have to cut, right, when the dollars go away, this funding cliff that we were talking about. And so you see very high percentages here for their plans to cut summer and enrichment programs, and also for staff that are working in the after school space. So just something for us to be very mindful of, and how do we really ensure that our sector are working together to prepare for this fiscal cliff. I'll wrap up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Belah. Very, very informative, lots to think about. And Rebecca informs me that the slide presentations will all be available after the webinar, which is great because I'd like to see them again too. Autumn, you're up.
Hey everyone, let me get my slide shared. Do we all see those? Does that look good to everybody?
Yes.
Great. So like Ron and Rebecca said, I'm Autumn Rivera with the National Conference of State Legislatures, and I work in our education program. For those of you who aren't familiar with NCSL, we are a bipartisan organization representing the legislatures in all 50 states and the territories. I specifically get to work on education policy focused on after school, summer, social emotional learning, student mental health, school climate. You'll see my colleague Ashley Wallace probably pop some stuff in the chat for you too, and I get to work with her and all this stuff. So let's get started. So let's get a little bit of this history about data projects that we have been working on. So back in 2014, NCSL, with the support of the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, decided to offer a competitive grant project that could help statewide after-school networks highlight data about programs across their state. So like before this, we kind of noticed that many networks had more like anecdotal data about after-school and summer learning programs, but through this grant project, networks could collect and see data that could be presented to legislators, legislative staff, other key state policymakers, and key champions to really help better inform policy decisions. NCSL has been able to assist with these grants by helping them package their information and for legislators, really have pulling out the things that legislators are looking for. Since its conception, NCSL has been able to work with almost all 50 states. You'll see that on the green here on the map. And some of these states we've been able to work with twice, which I'll talk about as well. So our projects weren't limited to just data mapping projects, but rather we had states look at their state context and see what type of data would really be useful when considering what they have going on where they're at, which has led to other projects like return on investments as alongside data mapping projects. We really asked states to look at their current state environment, those things that really serve to motivate their project goals, mainly what problem or problem state networks we're trying to solve and how that will align with major state education policy priorities such as workforce challenges. Since COVID-19 and the release of the ARPA funding, we've also asked states to look ahead at the federal funding cliff and really see what that means for their state as well. So when we open up the possibility the last couple of years for states to apply for a second grant, we also asked them additional questions about their past work and how they would be able to expand and leverage it. We also asked that they have at least 3 letters of support from key stakeholders. But for us, it was really important when scoring these RFPs that they were really going to have legislators involved preferably from both parties. And that would also indicate to us that the networks were aligning their work with legislative priorities and also had context that they could really be working with. And we've seen states do a couple really interesting things with it. We've seen them use it for site visits, which I'll talk about. We've seen it combined with the national data like America After 3 p.m. to really see that, which I'll talk about. And states have usually done reports or like one-pagers as well as release events. So let's look at some of those projects. So one of the trends we see is states look at rural versus urban, environments. So with this map in Illinois, they looked at program locations, and many of their locations are really centered around their urban areas. They were able to use this tool to share with their rural and conservative legislators and able to take them on site visits. So they would take them to these site visits and use this map to say, like, look, this is this really awesome program, and look at where these are these deserts where there's not this kind of programming. So that was definitely an interesting way for legislators to visualize and be able to see what's out there in their state. Like I said, some of the states have chosen to do return on investment projects, and these studies they felt like really were what was the most accurate to meet their policy challenge in their states. Since states may have some similarities, think like math scores, but they also have challenges that are specifically unique to their state, like budgets or what their legislators or governor priorities are. So in Georgia, their return on investment study, they analyzed programs funded by after-school care programs or 21st century community learning centers. So another trend we've seen is states look at the map specifically for after school or for summer. We've seen them do both, but this is like a different focus they've had as well. So in Vermont, they focus on summer programs specifically at the request of their governor's office, which is a really cool way to see how they were involving, key policy makers in their states. Their interactive map also added social determinants of health overlays. This included health disparities, doctor offices, farmers markets, mental health resources, and more. So, that they can, like legislators and other policymakers can really dig in and see like a full image of what's going on in their state. So like I said, we've had the opportunity the last couple of rounds to work with states more than once, and New Mexico is one of those states. So you can see on the top here, there's like the different types of overlays and things you can look at on this story map that New Mexico has. And one of the filters you'll see is they have a tab for ESSER funds. So these maps have really gotten more sophisticated since the beginning in 2014, and we've really asked state networks to dig deeper and match the quality by adding more overlays like this. So with this one, they can definitely talk to their legislators and highlight the needs and where the highest needs are for this funding when funding is gone, which is a major point of conversation. Alongside the maps, networks have really come out with really cool one-pagers to highlight their maps and how to use them. So we don't want somebody on this map be overwhelmed and not understand them. So California was a really great example of being able to break down how to use these maps so legislators can really figure out how to break things down to districts, can break down what they're looking for so that they can use it for their, policy initiatives. I think this was already shared with you, but my colleague's also going to pop it in the chat. I did the most recent article that summarizes the links to our 2022 data cohort group. This consisted of Connecticut, Georgia, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Virginia, as you'll see on the map. These projects collected data on municipal demographics, identified opportunity deserts, highlighted the needs of communities of color and in certain rural areas. These networks mapped community schools, after school, and summer learning programs. And many of these networks use these indicators, like I've mentioned before, to show intersections between structural barriers, academic achievement, and like local OST programs. The article that's shared with you, you can go see all of where it's at, and you can look at their maps and their projects, which is neat. Another cool example I'll show is in Maryland, they've used this map for helping some of their policy priorities. So they have a really cool initiative around community schools. And since they have community school dollars, they're able to use their map to inform this policy to see where after school is and isn't a part of the community schools in their states. It's been really a way to, like I said, to inform policy initiatives, and Maryland's a great example of that. And what's funny is we actually had a meeting back in the fall where we had like a session on these data maps, and we kind of heard like legislators and staff be like, oh, what's this? Whatever. And then they walked away being like, this is actually so cool. Do I have one in my state? How can I get one in my state? Because they really saw the advantage of it. So that was a really nice thing to hear them say. So I went over that quickly, and I only showed a couple examples. So if you have more questions, if you want to see what's going on in different states, if you want to see if a state has a map, please feel free to reach out to me or my colleague, and we will be happy to help you with that. And with that, that is the end of my time.
Impressive. Thank you so much. All three of you. So I learned so much in your presentations. We now want to go to your questions first, and great to see so many of you. We have some in the chat. If you want to come off mute at some point, you can, but I just have a few that Rebecca threw out and she can jump in.
Sure.
But
Do you want to maybe start with Steve Fowler's question? Because it's kind of a big overview one around.
why don't you ask it? Because I don't know which Steve asked. I haven't been.
Sure. So Steve, if anyone knows him, he's always asking this question, and it's how can we help programs look beyond the ARPA dollars while they're also still trying to capture them? So it's the advocacy and still accessing them, but also thinking beyond. Maybe Erik, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think that's the challenge that we're always bringing to local providers and intermediaries at the local level and the state level, the statewide after school networks. All the stakeholders who are involved in this is asking them to do more with less, and asking them to, in addition to continue that advocacy, reaching out on partnerships at the state and local level to really maximize, especially in those areas where there are some states that are only at like 15% of their ESSER 3 funds, their Education American Rescue Plan funds that they've accessed yet. So there are still opportunities, and we're mapping those, being strategic about making sure that outreach happens. But at the same time, yeah, collecting the stories now, doing the evaluation, keeping an eye towards what's going on in their state houses. Does your state have a surplus? Is there an opportunity to, particularly in those states that use their American Rescue Plan funds for statewide competitions for after school and summer, the impact of those, I'm thinking about states like Georgia and Idaho and Vermont, so many, Massachusetts and others, Arkansas, South Carolina, those funding streams, those competitions which never happened before, those have created programs in communities that now parents are understanding and seeing the value. They've never had a program in their school before. Now they do. Teachers are seeing the value of it. The principals see the value of it with students participating. The young people themselves are huge champions for it, that they've been able to participate in what the program looks like. And so it's tapping into all those voices to the state houses in those states to say, look, we've never had our own state program for after school and summer. We were able to with the ARP. We can't let this go away. This can't happen. When you talk to the early child advocates, that was a big part of their push was getting, universal pre-K in states. And once parents tasted that, they're not going to let it go away. And so we're in the same position right now of being able to make that case, point to these great successes, and help work in any way we can with folks. And the role of funders is huge here too, to make sure folks have the capacity to make the case, to be able to continue on and have impacts that go past 2024 and 2026.
See Rebecca's note in the chat. We have lots of really smart folks here. If anybody wants to come off mute and just share strategies that you're seeing that are working, or throw it in the chat, either way, please do. Anyone want to jump in? What about mental health, funding for mental health for some of the, obviously there's big staffing issues. What are you seeing as the bright spots on some of these key areas that are so important to strong after school and summer learning programs? I don't know, Belah, Autumn, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen some investments from the city side, into mental health programs, into supporting those organizations that are providing those services. I'd love to see more investments in the integration between, programs, after school programs, and sort of recognizing them as a strategy to also address mental health and to have those supportive caring adults, in programs, and that be a strategy. So We've seen some of that, but I think in sort of the new data that's come in, I was seeing sort of more specific issues addressing public mental health as a public health issue that were more on the service side versus on the sort of programmatic side. So I think that it's a huge issue for cities, and we've been talking about it across NLC for sure. And folks are very aware of the challenges facing young people and adults. But again, would love to see sort of more of a recognition of that these programs not only are providing academic and enrichment and recreation, but also are really serving as a key mental health support as well.
Yeah, and I'll add, we've been really seeing mental health as a major policy area that the policymakers are looking into. So we're regularly having conversations about that and seeing what legislation is being put out there for that. I'll put in the chat my most recent piece that's summarizes kind of the mental health legislation that came out last year, which has been kind of similar over the last handful of years. In 2021, we had a really cool call where we had student leaders who were in after school and summer programs speak to a legislator from Democrat and Republican, and they talked about how after school really helped their mental health and how that supported them during the pandemic. And I think that was a really cool spot where you could see, you had giving youth the voice to be able to speak about it, and then had the legislators be there to be able to respond and say, oh, okay, this is what we're working on, this is what we're doing. And I think that was a really neat take on what's kind of going on.
Great. If any of the funders on the call have a key question or perspective, I know many of you, look across some of these areas, please jump in as well. Where do you all see the hope? Where do you all see, obviously we, from the reports you put out that you've mentioned here, the states who are and locales that are kicking in dollars, those are great, great hope. But as Belah, you put up that last slide, which I know is in the minds of everyone. What do you see as the hope in terms of, coalitions, in terms of advocacy, in terms of, the kinds of presentations to city councils and legislatures, governors, and Congress, of course, that you all think could make a difference? I don't know, Erik or Belah, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in at the local level and to respond to Jennifer Peck's note earlier in the chat. I think that the pandemic, one, of course, brought people together and really had to lean on each other to understand how to support young people. I think the ARPA dollars, have also created new conversations and new partnerships between all of these different entities, schools, CBOs, cities, and states. And so my hope is, you're seeing some of the examples, we all laid out some and we have more on the map, that people understand the value that each other bring to this field, and that these conversations can continue to occur. I think at the local level, the coalition building that has occurred, it's really a ripe opportunity for more of these local sort of citywide system intermediaries, where there can be someone who is leading the charge and bringing all of these stakeholders and bringing all of the providers together. And I think that, school districts and city leaders, mayors, superintendents can really play a role in helping to shine, a spotlight and more attention on this. So I'm hoping for, we've been getting a lot of calls from communities around, how do I, get this money and how do I organize my community and these programs, and really do feel like that local intermediary governance structure is an effective, mechanism to ensure that programs, are able to receive the money and that people know of them. Because we know there's a lot of great work happening in these small nonprofits that, are not getting the eyes and ears, of the people who control the purse strings. And so that's where I see a lot of hope, and I think it's just a really ripe area for us to think about, investment in those types of organizations as well. We're really playing that coordinating function.
Great. Autumn or Erik, you want to jump in as well?
I can chime in really quick. I see lots of hope. Hopefully some of that came through. I think the national, since Belah started with local, I'll start with national, that the national level, the initiatives at Department of Ed and other agencies, Engage Every Student, the National Partnership for Student Success. This is the first time we've had a Secretary of Education who's come out publicly and committed to after school and summer learning opportunities, quality opportunities, and out of school time for every student that wants them. And so seizing that, leveraging that at the state and local level, I think is key. Again, the examples that we've seen at the local level and the state level of partnerships of groups coming together. There was a question in the chat too about work being done with the budget process and the legislative sessions in states right now. And as I mentioned, 19 states have legislation pending, or some of that's legislation, some of that's budget proposals from governors. And there is a lot of work going on at the state level, statewide intermediaries and others who are, following up on that, helping make that reality. So I do have quite a bit of hope. I think there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done, but continuing to capture the stories of what someone else in the chat said, do we know exactly how the dollars are being spent? And that is, we have 2 full-time fellows, that's all they're doing here at the Afterschool Alliances. The education funds in particular, just like National League of Cities and Belah is doing with the city funds, is, what does that look like on the ground, how those funds are being used, and what's the impact? And being able then to again leverage that into success moving forward and having continued. We know the public and parents support funding for after school and summer. We know this works. That's well documented. So yeah, I'm feeling hopeful that we can make the case moving forward.
I'll just quickly add, I think what's great is we were saying that it's really a bipartisan issue, and that's a really great place for NCSL to sit, because then we can offer that information and we have it really coming from both sides that want it, and we're able to provide that for them, which is, I think, awesome. And then so before I joined NCSL, I had the opportunity to work in programming, and then I joined NCSL really during the pandemic. So I feel like the innovation that we've been able to see over the last couple of years has been really interesting to follow. And as Erik said earlier, when there's challenges, there's opportunities. And I think that's really true in this case.
That's great. In that vein of what you've all been talking about in terms of funding, are you seeing cases where more kids are now being served? There are lots of organizations out there. They're not all the big Ys and Boys and Girls Clubs, et cetera, and who are serving kids, particularly in high poverty areas, and they run on shoestring budgets. Are you seeing some of this funding getting to those kinds of organizations and bringing in kids who haven't been served before? Belah?
Yes, 100%. I mean, that is the purpose, right? We're hoping to have programs expand with this money and new programs be developed as well. So certainly at the city level, particularly with their Parks and Rec programs, there've been a lot of investments, within own city governments to expand those programs. And, especially when you look at like during the pandemic and, kind of during recovery and post, many of those programs were shut down. So, being able to really ensure, because those programs and community centers, are in communities and in areas that, where young people really need access to them. So 100% yes, and we need to see so much more of it.
Cool. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in on that one. Erik?
Yes. So I think trying to think the best way to approach to say it, but well, I think what I'll do is, so we've been asking throughout the pandemic, parents and programs, what the challenges have been. One of the big ones we have seen, there are examples, as Belah said, and we've seen the education funds and the city funds, particularly at the state level competitions where CBOs, that community-based organizations that never were able to apply for federal funds, maybe had a barrier to accessing 21st century funds, that were able to access those funds for the first time. We saw that in Minnesota and Georgia and elsewhere, and really bring programs to communities, and amazing stories as a result from all levels. But there are challenges too. And so we are seeing wait lists at those small programs and big programs. Staffing continues to be a challenge. I know this group has spent lots of Friday sessions on that. Those challenges will continue. We do have coming out in the next couple of weeks the latest wave of our provider survey, and there's some good news, but also some of those challenges are still there in terms of staffing and wait lists for programs. So yeah. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah, but it's good to see there are some bright spots and some examples that everyone can use. Probably the last question, because we're getting close to time, from Andrea and Rebecca. So the president has these executive orders on an equity action plan. How do you think that might advance, the high quality OST equitable access agenda? I know that's a big question, but if you have some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think executive orders are an important part of the policy puzzle, particularly when, as we talked about earlier, Congress is so divided. And so I think this one and others as well, with gun and violence prevention, I think we're still wrapping our head around the latest one, but the fact that the Department of Ed has this initiative, Engage Every Student initiative, the fact that AmeriCorps, formerly the Corporation for National Community Service Agency, has taken this on, Department of Justice and the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention, Administration of Children and Families at HHS. There's so many agencies, and big part of this is having those agencies de-silo, talk together, and the work that you're doing, Ron, with the fellows in a lot of those agencies is making a big difference. That's been noticeable over the last few years. And so we're hopeful that these executive orders and the initiatives that have been created and the dialogue that's happening that maybe hasn't in the past, will represent some opportunities for sure.
So you each have about 10 funders here on the webinar today. Are there specific ideas you would have for funders who are here at this, time when there's opportunity and challenges? We have just a couple of minutes left. Anybody want to suggest thoughts?
Well, I know we have funders at the national level and community foundations, all the way down. And so I think there's so many different roles to play. Obviously there's lots more, research and technical assistance that, a lot of our organizations, want to do. But, when you think at the local level also, I'd say leverage your leadership in that space to bring your city leaders and your school leaders together. We're trying to really broker more conversations locally, and you bring clout to do that, and potentially you have dollars to bring to the table too, to really help leverage dollars that, both school districts and cities have, and to ensure that those nonprofit programs, that are offering quality experience for young people, that they can happen, or to support kind of that coordinating function, the intermediary level, to make sure that dollars are able to flow and that you're able to help all programs increase the quality of their programs so kids have access to, high quality experiences.
That's great. Erik, did you have a quick?
Yeah, I'll say, the American Rescue Plan is making a difference. Funders can step in there and help with the evaluation side of that, telling the story, helping providers and intermediaries at all levels, national, state, and local, collect that and get the word out. Following the lead of STEM Next and other funders who have embraced the importance of funding advocacy and policy organizations to help, not crossing the line to lobbying, but building awareness. There's an opportunity to seize out there, but there's also a path forward, we feel, to sustainability with that combo of private sector, local, state, and federal. Hoping that however funders see themselves as playing a role, there's a spot for everybody. I think, whether it's the research side, the evaluation, the advocacy, the programs piece.
Ron, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thanks to all three of you. You are tops in the field. We're so lucky to have each of you where you are. They're very accessible. So if you're new to this group, please reach out to them. Rebecca, would you like to wrap up?
Yes, thanks so much. A huge thank you, Ron, for managing the conversation. Thank you, Autumn, Belah, and Erik for sharing so many resources and information. As Ron said, feel free to reach out to these experts for more information. And I put a bunch of announcements in the chat. Hope to see you next month on March 17th. We'll have Dr. Shah Jinwright sharing about healing-centered work and preparing young people to support their peers with mental health. And then there's an opportunity to think about workshops at the annual conference for Ed Funder members. And just the final plug on Power of Us Workforce Survey, which is going to be a huge policy tool to hear directly from the staff and volunteers working with youth. We've got like 6 more weeks to get more responses. So please visit and encourage all staff and volunteers, to complete that survey. Thank you so much for joining today. We hope to see you soon.